Welcome to Dear Sandy. I'm Sandy Galiff, a member of the New York State Assembly, representing parts of northern Westchester and parts of Putnam County. And today we're going to be talking about breaking news with Jay Forbes. And I think we'll have a wonderful discussion about how you can really have a discussion in your community about all the various issues that are going on. And welcome, Jay.
Thank you very much, Sandy. A pleasure to be here.
It's great to have you here. You are a Croton resident.
I am. I've been up here since 1973, as a matter of fact.
Right. So that's been a while.
It has been a long walk. It passed very quickly. And
Right.
I enjoy the community tremendously. I came up from New York City with my family, and we've spent many good years up here.
Right. I don't know when I first got to know you, but I did remember reading in the paper that you were starting this discussion series at the Austin Public Library.
Yes.
And I thought, oh, this is so interesting to have a discussion series about, I guess it's about what's going on in the community, in the world, in the nation. Is it about everything that's going on?
Well, different groups take different tacks. I'm fortunate in being able to be exposed to a lot of different groups, different formats. Chappaqua, for example, has an auditorium where they have either Skype or live speakers coming in and concentrates pretty much on foreign policy. A very good group, very interesting. Do it, I believe, about twice a month on Mondays. And Katona has a similar operation, but they use a small coterie of wise men that have been there a long time and volunteer to take point in conjunction with Foreign Policy magazine. And so everything is geared to foreign policy, short presentations and then open discussion, 50 or 60, mostly senior citizens and local residents of Katona. Probably the most interesting and erudite group of people that I come in contact with. And then Croton, which is very collegial, very, very lovely in terms of a gathering, an intimate gathering of locals at the municipal building. And so I was a part to each one of these. We were fortunate to have a professor, Ed Pressman, and Marcia Gellert from WCC who conduct this class.
That's the Westchester Community College.
Yes, and they have their own classes.
So they did that, they conducted a class at the Croton Library?
At the Croton Municipal Building.
The municipal building.
Yes,
Okay.
and they have about 35 or so senior citizens participating there. And that's an all-discussion group led by Pressman and Gellert. And they bring up subjects of currency and breaking news. And the group's been together a long time, and we're very, very friendly. And afterwards, we always take lunch together. So I've had experience with all these different groups, and it occurred to me that I would like to do my own and continue to go to each of their classes. So I called around. One group was not interested, one community was not interested, but when I called the Ossining community, James Trapasso, who coordinates senior events there, said, yeah, adult events, come down, let's talk about it. And we sort of laid out the ground rules for this and my vision of what it should be. And I've been doing it every other Tuesday for almost 2 years now.
That's great. That's great. And how many people do we get to come to that?
Down there, it averages, I would say, about 24 about 24
Right.
people. They're not always the same 24 people, but there is an inner circle that always is there. And they range from people who just occasionally watch the news and like the topics that are discussed to others that are really into it.
Now, do people know when they go to any of these groups what the topics are going to be ahead of time? Or do you just come in and it's the topic of the day, what was in the newspaper in the morning or whatever?
That's a good question. I would say a mix. Some of the groups announce in advance who the speakers are and what the topic will be. Myself, sometimes I do that and sometimes I don't. And I try to break my session into basically two parts. One would be the more current news that I think people might be interested in, and the second part a little more far-reaching in terms of not just, what's going on today is that people gravitate, as we all do, to Trump, what he does right, what he does wrong, and the arguments and discussions that come out of that. I try to look at more far-reaching implications. So if you look at issues, for example, like income inequality, or immigration and the effect it has on autocratic government, I look at the United States, but I also take it internationally and try to broaden the subject so we can discuss what the implications of these major themes are and how it impacts on our daily lives, on our own lives, and in the trend lines that are happening internationally.
So you have to really prepare for this.
I do.
And so you probably start out with proposals on various things, as you've just mentioned.
I actually
to talk
make
about
that.
it.
I make that selection myself, but I kind of have a feel for what the class would find most interesting. I think I read the New York Times online and on weekends, clip things, underline things. I get excerpts from Atlantic, from New Yorker, Washington Post 5-minute summary, and other things that I see. And I've even spiced it up a little bit by putting together a quiz.
A quiz? Oh my
quiz.
goodness! Do they have to pass?
They don't.
They don't.
They never. I don't see their papers. They self-mark. There are 10 questions that are asked. They complain bitterly about them. But if I were marking on a curve, I would say normally somebody with a 60 or 70 is at the top of the class because they're difficult. Even multiple choice becomes difficult because I cover a wide range of subjects, both domestic and international. And I do that about once a month. And the winners get books from my library because at this age I'm looking to give away books, not take in more.
Okay.
So as I finish my books, some are political, some are just bestsellers, some are just great fiction, and it's a lot of fun.
That really is. That
is.
really is. So do people come up to you after your discussion and say, what about this topic, that
Yes.
topic, whatever?
Yes.
And you try to pull together some of those ideas?
I do, and there's merit in that on both sides, by the way. I would say the group is largely more progressive or liberal in its leanings, but there are people there that I would say are independent or even leaning toward this present administration, and they're given fair hearing on their ideas, and when they come to me, I do entertain them and try to maintain a balance, which I think is very, very important during the discussion. Everybody gets a hearing, nobody gets attacked. And if I may, the only thing I brought with me, a little notice to read something that guides me. And I must say this was pilfered from Katona because they had it when I first joined, and it said discussions should be conducted without fondness for dispute or desire for victory.
Oh, very good, very good.
I thought
we need to have that across the board, everywhere, right?
I agree with you.
Because we've really gotten to a point where, so often people are losing friends and relationships with family members and so on,
Yes.
given their positions on different things probably going on in our nation as opposed to international, but it could be international also, and that's really hard. So you make sure that people can discuss.
Yes. Without acrimony.
Right. So what happens if somebody does? Do people get tense? A little tense?
They do. It doesn't happen often, but sometimes people do. And even though they know my political leanings, everybody's aware of that, I try to take a very neutral position as a moderator, and they know that I'm fair in terms of cutting people off or bringing them back to the issue at hand rather than making it a personal attack. And most people comply with that. They stay within the boundaries. I must say that afterwards, there's always a small group of 6 to 10 that go out to one of the local restaurants in Ossining sometimes, the Landmark Diners.
Do they continue their conversations?
And they continue the conversation, and it's a little more broad, and there's a little more leeway to it, but I'm there. And people like each other, even though their political thoughts may be differing. I think that they basically respect and like each other, and that makes it a very, very interesting and, for me, pleasurable experience.
Right. Now, at the Ossining Library, most of the people from Ossining,
Yeah.
or are they?
Yeah, but there are people that come as far as from Croton or from the North Country up near Valeria. So we have a pretty wide range. It's usually river people along the river that come. And most of them come back, I'm pleased to say. So it seems to be working very nicely. And I enjoy it thoroughly, and I learn from it. And hopefully those people learn. So sometimes they will only reinforce their own thoughts, but if there's somebody who's particularly involved in an issue and can make a case for that issue, there's give. I see them thinking and actually exploring an alternative view. I can't say anybody's been converted one way or the other to date, but at least they allow the merit of that person's argument and do give them consideration.
Right. That's great. So you're keeping everybody's mind going. You're invigorating the news. What are some of what kind of topics have you've been doing this now for about a year?
Over a
year
year.
and a half?
It's almost
right?
2 years now, yeah.
Okay. So, what are the array of different topics that you've had
Well,
over
it's
time?
it's almost impossible to depart from Trump because he is so much in the news, and he inserts himself into so many issues. So, I mean, I can go through a number of topics that I think I alluded to before. Immigration and what is drawn. There are so many young people now who do not believe in democracy. I think a third of the millennials don't think that that's the best way of government. That to me is rather frightening. What's driving this? In Europe, we know it's immigration.
Is that something that's been polled? That's news to me, but has that been,
It's been
something
polled.
that's been polled?
I
Okay.
can't quote from memory, but it was a legitimate poll, and it's frightening. And in Europe, it's even higher. There's something, I think, worldwide, it's about 50% of people questioning democracy. And of course, a lot of it is driven by fear. We look at what the motives are for this move toward autocratic government, toward popularism, and most of it is fear. And some of it is very validated. If you're in a homogeneous country where everybody is the same, you've lived in a little village where everybody practices the same religion, goes about their life in pretty much the same way, and all of a sudden people come who do not look like you, act like you, live like you, there's fear. And if that is generated and extended by the governing people of that country, then people move in a more radical way. They support somebody who's a savior who will protect them from change, from
So
fear.
you have discussions with people that are older about how younger people might feel about this and
Sometimes,
why?
and sometimes the other way, Sandy. Sometimes how older people feel as compared, because not everybody is a senior citizen in the group. Some are early retirees, some are middle-aged, and they feel, and we had some young people. We had a woman from China who was a part, who was wonderful in contributing to the discussion, gave us a different view of things.
So somebody like that would come in and having lived in China, had she lived
Having
in
lived
China?
in China.
Right, too.
And studying here. Yeah.
Right, and having very different views on that.
Different views and perspective on how she is, as somebody who's a native of that country, would look at it and how she feels about the United States. And that opens it up. So any time you get views that are just not what you would hear in the common arguments on the street, it expands the conversation. I think it makes people think and consider the merits of both sides. Of both sides. We had one whole thing about all the things that Trump had done. That happened to be a Trump day. And people were venting against him and a few defending him. And I asked that we wait. And at an appropriate time, we had a class devoted to all the things he did and discussed it in terms of, yes, we know it's outrageous, and yes, this, and yes, that, but is there merit to how he was going about it or why he was going about it? And that, to me, at least selfishly, gave me a new perspective, and I heard other people contribute to that I hadn't thought about before.
Right.
And if I do that,
If you're
it's
doing
successful.
that, you know that other people are doing the same. We don't really have those kind of opportunities. I mean, I do a little bit because I'm up in Albany and all we do is talk about government, how it works, and
Yes.
laws and all that kind of
Yes.
stuff, and what's been in the newspaper and how we deal with it and so on. So little different feeling, but I know from my friends,
Yes.
they're just not into all of that. So it does. I mean, people watch television. And I've heard some commentators talk about we kind of watch television in relationship to our views. So if you have certain views, you watch that channel. And if you have other views, you watch another channel. So you're not getting that cross discussion that you're getting in your discussion groups.
Interesting you should mention that, because I've done a couple of things in that direction. I've asked people as an assignment to watch Fox, MSNBC, and CNN, and regardless of where they normally went to, and come back with some input as to what their feelings were and how they differed in their treatment of the news, in which news topics were discussed, and how much spin was put on it. And I did the same thing with print vehicles, with the Post, the News, and the Times, and Wall Street Journal. Sometimes, interestingly, what is the positioning of that article? Is it on the front page, or is it buried deeply in the publication itself? Is the article straight and non-spin, but the headline colored?
Right, right.
We had, our
Well, they're headline writers, aren't there? I mean, that's what headline writers, and they don't necessarily always get the gist of the article. Or
that
whatever.
was my, I was in publishing for 45 years, business to business, not political. And the editors that were under me had somebody differing write the headline. And I won't go into all the details, but at one time somebody wrote a terrific article, very balanced, and the headline was so inflammatory that we had calls threatening to cut our circulation, not read us any longer. And it was strictly because the headline writer was being cutesy and had no idea what the intent of the article really was. And that's interesting that you mentioned that.
Right, yeah. So if people come in for the discussion group, I would think if I've read the paper in the morning,
yes,
and I've gotten energized by whatever I've read, that I might want to have that as a discussion piece, but you may say, no, today we're talking about North Korea and South Korea.
I give them a little leeway.
Do you give them leeway? Okay.
I do. I have what I call hanging chads
Okay.
from the election in Florida. Remember hanging chads?
Right.
Hanging chads. So but for me, these are leftover items that we have not finished discussing. For example, we're on trade, and we're talking about the NAFTA, and we're leading into TPP. Why? How? What's the downside? What's the upside? Is there merit? So that's being discussed. So that hanging chad, and after hanging chad, we'll probably discuss 3 or 4 items that are going on, because if you ignore Stormy Daniels today, they're going to walk out on you. So you have to address Stormy Daniels. And so I wrote a song based on
a Stormy Daniels song?
Weather. You remember Stormy Weather?
Stormy Weather, right? Yes,
so instead of Stormy Weather, I call it Stormy Daniels.
Uh-huh.
Changed the lyrics, and actually...
Do you sing at your discussion groups?
Well, not in my own discussion group yet. I've spared them that unless they're really ill-behaved, and then I'll have to bring the guitar in and sing. But I did it in the Croton group. And God bless them, Ed and Marcia allowed me to come in and do that, and I think people enjoyed it because they did applaud.
And what kind of tunes, what do you do?
Well, I did the Stormy
the
Weather.
Stormy Weather one, okay.
And I did that, using the music for that. And the words were my own, of course.
So your singing relates to issues that are going on?
Yes, only.
Okay.
And I have one called Fox TV News, which I've performed as well. So.
Oh, very good.
Yes.
Okay. So what was you touched on your background for just a little bit. So you were in business and publishing?
Publishing. Business to business publishing. And our firm was dedicated to the coverage of all types of mass merchandisers. That would be the discounters like Walmart, Target, and those people. We did the same thing with the drug chains, Walgreens, CVS, etc., and the supermarkets like our friend ShopRite here, and others, A&P when they were around, and others. And I did that for 45 years in various roles until I became group publisher. And the advantage of that was the moderating experience I had as a publisher in bringing together the hierarchy and executive management teams of these various chains. When you brought them together, they really didn't want to discuss their own marketing. What am I looking for?
Well, they were in competition, right?
Yeah, because they're sitting there with competition. And so they didn't want to really exchange ideas that were privileged ideas. But there were certain ideas that they would talk about in common. And so I learned a lot in moderating those and adding a little levity to it and keeping them at ease. And it was very productive. And the manufacturers that were interested in interrelating with them and selling their product were part of that discussion. And I did that for a number of years.
So this just really, that was your background
Yes.
in doing these
Yes.
discussion series.
That's correct.
Little did you know that you were going to be at the Ossining Public Library doing breaking news, right? I mean, you never
That is true.
would have thought about that.
That is absolutely true.
So have things changed since you've been doing it for a year? Have the topics changed a lot? Have the people have different views? Do you see anything different from when you started to
Oh, yes.
to now?
I don't think the news has changed because I started it when Trump was a candidate. It's been about 2 years, actually, almost. I think it's about 2 years. And Trump was a candidate at that point, so he was still dominating the news and so dominated our discussions. And when I started, it wasn't so much issue-oriented. It was all Trump. It was kind of like you see on cable news today. Everything emanated from Trump. As far as people's thoughts, I feel that the sense of opposition from the left because of his treatment and his manner has definitely increased. This blue wave that we talk about, people are much more impassioned, much more furious at the way he goes about things. And the people who voted for him or side with him are much more defensive and about him, and I think on the defense largely because they're outnumbered, to be honest, in most of these classes. So I try to give them a little larger voice in terms of what they're representing
Right.
and why they feel the way they do.
Well, we've all learned that President Trump speaks more every day on different issues, and
Yes.
and our former presidents really didn't do that.
That's correct.
So, if you were having this discussion group with Obama president or one of the Bush's president, I guess would it be quite different?
It would be quite different. I think Obama it would be harder to focus on him because he was so much less in the news as a point person. Even the things. Look, he was involved in pursuing illegal immigrants differently, but still pursuing them and sending a great deal of them abroad. You never heard anything.
We didn't
about
really think about it.
He did not push the needle. He did not. He was not inflammatory. But with Bush and the Iraq War, I think it would be very much the same. I remember all of that.
On
And
that
Clinton.
one topic. On
And
that one-
Clinton
and
also.
Clinton.
Go ahead, please.
Right. No, and Clinton.
Clinton with the indiscretions in office, and I know at that time the Republican Party, conservatives, etc., were very much against the Clintons. There was a lot of antipathy that wanted him out. So it was not quite at the level that you have. I don't think anything approaches the level that you have now with Trump, but it was there.
Right. But we also didn't, if we think back, we didn't have the social media the same way.
Right.
We didn't have all these emails going out. And I just think we just have so much of it. And a lot of people just kind of turn it off, but not the people that come to your discussion groups.
Some of their filling time, or honestly, or they may be going to another class before or after. But most that are there have a heightened interest in this. And I would say that interest has been heightened, including my own. I must tell you that all the years that I've been around in business and all, I was always interested in foreign developments and foreign news and the rest, but not so much in the local issues, which I'm now involved in because of the change.
Well, actually, Jay, you come to most of my meetings. Yes,
virtually
you
all
do.
of them.
Right.
And I love them, by the way. And compliments to you, honestly, on the town halls. They're refreshingly interesting. And because of your town halls, by the way, you had somebody, Betsy Rosenthal, who spoke on a single payer. And I had her as a guest. I have quarterly guests, and she came to speak on the same issue. And the leave-behinds I picked up at your town hall, I was able to use both pro and con.
Terrific.
So,
That's great. So are people going to continue to be as engaged? I mean, I really think everybody's so engaged. Although I'm feeling a little bit, as I said, people are backing away because they've had it. they were too engaged, and it's like they can't do this every moment. And I don't know, but will this continue? Will you still get the same number of people coming in and out to your discussions?
I
do
think
you
so. Actually, it's increasing.
Uh-huh.
And not just mine, but the other groups as well. I mean, women are leaving their grandchildren to come
Oh my goodness.
to this
Okay, instead
thing.
of taking care of their grandchildren,
It's come to that. It's come to that. Yeah, you know, you look at the issue, and I think you have to look at the issues to know why people get turned on. Environment in this area, in the North Country, is so important.
right. The Hudson Valley just calls for environmental
Right?
questions,
Water,
decisions.
water quality, air quality, the Hudson River itself. These are major issues, women's rights, and all of what's going on today. I think that's another, I'm just citing some of the things that people get impassioned about and get involved in and want to discuss and go further with and educate to their credit. So these are some immigration, how we treat our neighbors, whether they're legal or illegal, what's valid in the criticism and what isn't, and how should we react and work cooperatively with the police in these various areas to do this. All of these things, what our legislators do, what you're doing, Catherine's doing, Puglisi's doing, other people in the community, Latimer and the race there, people are taking more of an interest in how this impacts on their life. I know you get out a questionnaire, and I'm not here to make you feel good, but I will say all compliments to you. You get out a list of issues and say, what is meaningful to you? And that's why I come to your particular town halls, because you're hitting subjects that are of great interest. You fill up that town hall. And the reason you fill it up possibly is not the gale of draw, but the fact that you're centering on issues that are important to their lifestyle.
Right, right. No, we're really trying very much, and I'm just wondering, with people that go to the Alstein Library and go to these other groups
Yes.
and have discussion, are they the ones emailing me on topics? I bet. I don't know. I really don't know. But I have a feeling that they get engaged with something.
They are
and
involved.
They may be
They are
communicating with
involved.
me.
And the closer it comes to home, you know, it's not in my backyard type of mentality. I think that the housing, all of these things will impact the difficult situation in the north with Verplank, with Buchanan, trying to replace the energy. I mean, these are issues that affect people's lives, their jobs, their ability to live in the community, pay taxes, and replace energy. Those are issues that are in the forefront and should be.
Right.
And in that respect, I must tell you, I think the administration is good. The current administration is good in that it has gotten people out of their apathy and involved.
Right, which is great. So we want everybody that's watching to be involved. So how do they end up coming to what days of the week do you have
It's
this?
on every other Tuesday. May 15th is the next meeting. It's a free session. They don't have to sign up for 6 or 8 sessions. They can come anytime they want. When the other courses begin to end, I try to go weekly if the library can accommodate me. And so I know the 22nd is out, but starting in June, we may go weekly again as we did last summer with these meetings.
Well, this show may be on after those dates, but just keep in touch with the Alstein Library. And, I think it's great what you're doing. And I want to thank you so very much for being here.
Sandy, thank you.
Yes, and for all those watching, just be involved, express your views, contact me, contact Jay, or any of your elected officials, neighbors, etc. So have a really good evening. Thank you very much for watching.